This is Rhea, and this is Just the Who of Us, where we talk about a range of topics, including life events, current events, spirituality, entertainment, family relationships, as well as answering listener questions and more.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Just the Who of Us. Today, it is just going to be me. I decided to start reading chapters of my autobiography. For those of you who don't know or aren't familiar, I wrote an autobiography called Dirt on My Cloth. And so this episode is going to be basically just me starting to kind of dive into that book and get you guys familiar with it. I'll probably just go kind of chapter to chapter, or maybe not even full chapters to kind of stretch it out a little bit. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Or maybe I'll just do the episode talking about the whole book. And I don't really know. We're just gonna see how it goes. I don't have a lot of plans. I just know that I want to start reading this book to you guys. And today will be a good day to do that. So there hasn't been any episodes the last 2 weeks, I want to say, because between just working a lot and some medical family things, I just really hadn't felt like taking the time to record. Usually I try to record ahead, but it just hasn't worked out recently like that. And I appreciate you guys sticking around and being loyal listeners in my absence. So thanks for that. And welcome back again. So the title of my book is called Dirt on My Cloth. The title came from actually my oldest son. So I started working on this book maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. We'll just say around 10 years ago. I started working on the book, and, of course, I didn't have a title at the time. So I wrote just, I had kind of bits and pieces written about, the way that I write is kind of like I'm writing an essay. So I write out, uh, kind of break it down into like a paper. So I have, my title is my subheadings and whatever. And I break the subheadings down into chapters. Um, but anyway, I did a lot of writing when I was in college for both my masters, and I think no, actually, I started writing this before I went back to college for my master. So the autobiography I started writing, I think I started writing that before I went back to college, period. Is that what happened? Yeah, I started writing it before I went back to college. That's what it was. So I enjoyed writing essays before college, but um, I think I was in school for medical assisting when I first started writing the book. So I started writing it, and it became so emotional, honestly, that I put it down for like a couple of years. I put it down for a couple of years because I had kind of my outline, and then I had started my first two chapters. So the first chapter is daddy issues, the second chapter is mommy issues. And I started kind of working on the meat of those chapters. And I think I had maybe like 3 or 4 paragraphs of each chapter at that point, and then just kind of like the outline for the other chapters. And it just became such an emotional experience that I had to put it away. I wasn't in therapy yet. I wasn't at the point where I really, I thought I was at the point where I could talk about these things, but I wasn't emotionally there yet. So I'm writing, starting on these chapters. It gets really overwhelming, and I put it down. I kind of go on through life, and it's actually, to me, it's a good thing that it happened that way. I'm glad I didn't finish it when I thought I was going to finish it, because I still had more of my life to live and experience, and more thing into the book, even on the subjects that I had already started talking about. So a couple of years passed, and it was it was around the time of COVID. So COVID happened. So COVID happened, and I started writing something else. Now, mind you, I had gotten so far with the parenting workbook, I mean, with my autobiography, but I had to put it down at this point. So a couple of years passed, COVID happens, and I started this book. There's a mom brain version, there's a dad brain version, and this one was a pandemic parenting workbook, which, had I marketed it at the time, I think would have been a really, really big hit because of its target focus. Um, it covers topics like um, the election, vaccines, equality, like mask rules and virtual learning and all these kinds of things. And those are just those aren't the chapters in it, but those are just kind of like some examples as to why it was perfect for pandemic. I was in school for psychology at the time, and it was COVID, and I was like, oh, this would be perfect to help people get through this, to a lot of us, this big major, at some point, life-changing event. So I'm putting all this into this book. I finished this book, and this was the mom version. And I may put these back up on the website just for people, we're not in a pandemic anymore, but nostalgia maybe, or I mean, the information in here could still help. And I made them, so why not? You know? So I'm writing those workbooks, and a publisher reaches out to me and is like, hey, I saw your work. I would love to help you get these books published. And so I'm on the phone, Kentish Publishing Company. I'm on the phone with Esther, and I mentioned that I wrote an autobiography. And she's like, tell me about that one. So I tell her about this, and at this point I have the title because my son came to me and he was like, why don't you title it Dirt on My Cloth? Because uh it was kind of a religious reference to him. He said, well, God gives us this untattered, beautiful plain cloth, and the things that we go through in life become kind of blemishes on that cloth. And thus was born the name Dirt on My Cloth. And absolutely perfect. And because, that's my firstborn, it has a really special meaning to me. And it's true. Our when we're created into this world, God gives us this clean slate, and all the things we experience in life are like these little specks of dirt. But when we come to God, He still sees us, He respects us, and He treats us like we're clean, no matter how dirty our cloth is, right? Because we all make mistakes. And it's not about how far you get off track, it's about how you come back. And so thus was born the name Dirt on My Cloth. So I'm talking to her, and we're talking about this book, and she's like, no, I want that. I want to publish that book. I want to publish that book. So I was like, well, that book isn't really done. This other one's done though, if you want it. That book's not done. So, we talk and I say, okay, you know what, let's do it. I got a lot of work to put in this book, and honestly, I don't know that I'm gonna finish it by myself because it's emotional. It's deep, So far, all right, let's do it. So we do it. Um, I don't know how long it took. I'm gonna say we probably had like a year kind of thing, maybe 9 months. Might have been about 9 months. So we're saying 9 months to a year that we had for our timeline. And Kentish Publishing Company was the original publisher of the book. Um, Around the time we wrapped the book up and the book was officially published, um, we suffered a loss in our family. And it was unexpected. I mean, the person was sick for a while, but no matter how sick somebody is, it's still the instant that it happens, unless you're counting down the days and the hours and you're sitting by the bedside and like even then it's still the second it happens, it always catches you off guard no matter how prepared you are. And honestly, that wasn't a day that we were prepared for it to happen that day. So it was a big loss. And we wrapped it up and we just kind of uh parted ways amicably, for a couple of reasons, the death and just some other things. But at that point, I decided to um, self publish it. So legally, I got the rights back to the book and everything like that to self publish it. Um, there hadn't been any sales or anything like that, and you know, so at this point, fast forward a couple of years later, I think it was maybe 2022. I, you know, COVID is, we're not in the bulk of COVID anymore. We are, things are trying to work their way back to normal. And so, okay, well, a pandemic parenting workbook isn't really a need anymore because, well, we're not in the bulk of pandemic. So I did a little bit of tweaking to the mom brand and dad brand books and just made them just parenting workbooks, which are are always available on my website, Falolity, FALOLITY.net. And I'll get into those kind of in a separate episode, because they deserve their own attention. But along with the autobiography, those are available on the website too. And thus is the story of the autobiography, because honestly, it wouldn't have been published had it not been for the very beginning books were the pandemic parenting books. So now you know the backstory, and let's dive in a little bit to the actual book itself. So Turtle Law has 9 chapters. Chapter 1 is called Daddy Issues. Now, I know when people hear the word daddy issues, they naturally are going to think, oh, she's going to talk shit about her dad the whole time. That is not the case. I actually got some feedback from someone who was very reluctant to read the book, as they thought the same thing, like, oh, it's just going to be bashing your father, the whole chapter. And they read the chapter and they said that they were they were glad they read the book because it very elegantly discussed the topic. It's not a rag on my dad chapter. It's not talking about all the bad things that happened via my father, what he should have done, what he did, blah blah blah. That's not it. Um, The purpose of daddy issues was to just discuss all of my interactions with fathers over the years. As some of you know, as some of you don't know, I have children with three different men, one at the age of 14, one at the age of 18, and two at the ages of 21 and 23. So, three different men. My oldest son's father and I had a very rough relationship after I had our son. There was a large portion of the time we didn't speak. I was very unsatisfied with expectations not being met and things like that. My middle kid's dad, my second child's father has never met his child by his own will. So there's that relationship. It doesn't exist. And my younger two kids' father, we were married and we are divorced. And so, you know, if you haven't noticed a pattern, I did not have a very good track record with men because I did not trust men. My philosophy surrounding men for a very long time was, well, for one, you're going to hurt me, and I'm either going to hurt you first or I'm not going to take you seriously. I didn't take a lot of relationships seriously because why? They were just going to hurt me anyway, right? Like they were going to mistreat me or leave me or cheat on me or whatever. So I'm either going to play you first or I'm not going to take you seriously, was my philosophy for a very long time. Hence why I have children with different men and why I've been married. Why I'm on my second marriage. So back to daddy issues. And I'm not saying that my issues with my father caused my bad relationships because obviously I make my own choices, right? But I just had bad relationships with fathers in general. And that's what this chapter is about. I'm not going to read the whole chapter. I'm just going to read just maybe a couple pages to give you an idea. Plus, I want you to buy the book. And if I read you the whole book, then you're not going to buy the book. So, chapter one, daddy issues. I always think when dads doing an oil change on their car for them, taking them out to celebrate special occasions, taking cute pictures holding their children, or taking them to some sporting event, how I wish I had that. How lucky they must be to have a father who does things with them. We never know how people are at home when they don't have others watching. So many things in life for me came back to perspective. As for most of us, when we get older, we realize not everything was how we saw it. Sometimes we make up reasons for people's actions in our head because of what we know or don't know about them, or simply based on a reason that is just our own. I've always known who my father was, where he was, and how to reach him to some degree. When I was little, he was the best dad. I saw him every other weekend. When I was with him, things were good. From what I remember, he was calm, happy, and attentive. He would let me ride on his lap to the trash dump in his yellow truck and pretend to let me drive. I would go with him to recycle can tabs. He taught me how to defend myself after I got beat up by a classmate because I did not want to fight and get in trouble. To me, he was great. He and my aunt used to set up elaborate schemes at Halloween to scare me half to death, and it was so much fun. I think this might be a big reason why Halloween is one of my absolute most favorite times of the year. I love all things scary, gory, and gross. My half sister and I had a decent relationship as children, but as adults, our relationship was up and down. When I was with my father, she and I got along. When I was happy with my father, she and I got along well. However, when I was being treated like the stepchild later in my life by his family, our relationship took a toll. I was about 14 when it started to change. I got upset with them for supporting everything she wanted as a child and teen that they never did for me. I never took it out on her, but if I did, it wasn't done intentionally. Surprisingly, even up until I became pregnant when I was 14, he was still the same dad I knew and loved. I think the issue was not so much that I was pregnant, but the child's father was not white. To them, my choices re- reflected poorly on my father and his family. At the time, there were no mixed race children or mixed couples that I was aware of in their small town. I was probably 10 years later before it was probably 10 years before I even saw anyone living there that was not white. I would rather have them been mad at me for being pregnant than to care what race the child was and what that would look like to their neighbors. It was the first thing I remember my stepmother complaining about when she first learned of my pregnancy. My father did not say much about the pregnancy to me, although he seemed to be more supportive than the rest of the family. As the pregnancy progressed, my father and Nana's husband, my grandfather, informed me that they were disowning me. My father was no longer going to be in my life, and my grandfather would not be helping with college or anything else in my future. Again, not because of early pregnancy, but because of race. Months passed, and after a hot tea and walk around the block, my baby was ready to be born. My mother and my best friend at the time accompanied me in the hospital for the birth. The baby's father met us there. Due to the information relayed to me months earlier, I did not expect to see my father attend the birth. I was spending time with my newborn baby boy when I found out he was at the hospital and had when I found out my father was at the hospital and had met my son's father, shook his hand, and decided to recant his disownment. My stepmother and half sister and my father had come to visit us and meet my son. Apparently, at the birth of this new amazing and future soul saving boy, all was forgiven. Again, time passed, and even though I had learned my father and his family was not who I thought they were, I began to experience racism regarding my son, Dre. And this was just the beginning of my lifelong fight with them. My grandfather did not recant his decision to disown me, and my stepmother never treated my children like her own. My stepmother and my half sister regularly made racist comments toward me about being an N-word lover, finding me a white man, and other epithets that contradicted their claims of not being racist, despite their all-time favorite quotes. I'm not racist. I have black friends. I call white people the N-word too if they're ignorant. Again, these are other people's words, not mine. While these comments left a lasting impression that forever changed my relationship with them, it was the realization that I could never live up to my father's family's expectations that had the most significant impact on me. Once I visited my father as an adult and he asked me for a ride to the store. I agreed, and once we left the store, I found out he had just used me for a ride to the store to steal from it, and I was essentially his naive getaway driver. For a petty thief, which of course felt great, insert sarcastic laughter. At some point in my young adult life, I realized that my father had become a mere shell of the man I loved so dearly. This happened sometime between the phone calls that stopped and when his family prevented me from visiting him in the intensive care unit. A single phone call punctuated this period. When he called me for the first time from one of his many visits to rehab, telling me that he was getting it together this time and that he loved me. At some point, he let the drinking go, but he found other ways of destroying his body, including by replacing his addiction with over-the-counter medicines, one of the many of his other unnamed habits that I only learned of later. The man who loved me, protected me, defended me, taught me how to defend myself, and promised I would always be his little booper had become a husk of his former self. A man I barely recognized, who stopped standing up for me, refused to treat me equally as his second child, and instead taught me what not to do to my own children. It was only when I had 4 children and was dealing with my separation from my husband at the time that I realized this man was my only father, that I realized that this man was only my father's shell and would never be to me who he promised because it was no longer himself, because he was no longer himself. It is difficult to watch someone diminish from a healthy, vibrant, strong, intelligent, talented man to an addict, completely drained of all life. I only wish he would have taken better care of himself and his relationships. I'm going to stop there as to not ruin the rest of the chapter. Um, the chapter is not only just about my father. That is the beginning of the chapter. But the chapter also goes on about relationships with the fathers of my children and um not just my father. So I'm putting these videos on YouTube of reading the book, the different chapters of the book in different sections to do maybe like 3 to 5 minute videos on reading different pages here and there. But so that's just a little snippet of chapter 1. And then, like I said, it goes on to talk about my relationships with my children's fathers and how those not only were impacted by my childhood and my relationship with my father, but also how those relationships impacted me as an adult and our children and things like that. So I'm also working on writing. I'm working on actually doing a second edition of this book just because there's certain things that I've noticed with the editing of the first publisher, the editing of the original publisher, that I would like to change some wordings, and some things that I just want to make it more my own. I mean, everything in here I wrote, but when you're working with a publisher, sometimes they reword things because it fits kind of more their style. And when I was accepting edits and things like that, I went through and looked at every potential correction, but to be honest, the book is 151 pages. 100, the book itself is 140 pages. So that's 140 pages of edits. And I looked at most of them. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. There is also a self-reflection portion in the back of the book because I'm big on note taking personally. And I feel like it says self-reflection. I think reflection is important, and for me, taking notes is always helpful. Therefore, this section is dedicated to allowing space for you to take your own notes and allow space for self-reflection when and after you read. So there's also a portion in the back where you can take notes, or you can just be like me and write all over the book. It's your book. Do whatever you want. As long as you read it and self-reflect. And I hope that it is really helpful to you in your life. I'm working on writing my second part, which will be from about kind of vastly covering my 30s and going into turning 40. So it'll majorly focus on late 30s and the first year of being 40. So that one will be available 2026, 2025. Yeah, probably in May. I'll probably put it out in May of 2026 because I want to cover my first year of being 40. So that will also be following up some things that I left, the points that I left off in here. The last chapter in this book is called Reactions, and it kind of, talks about just reacting to the things that I wrote about, the things that happened in my life, and just kind of reflection. There's also a resources page in there. I don't know if you can see that clearly. as a lot of these topics in here are related to life and life experiences, processing them, experiencing them, reflecting on them, and things like that. And there are a lot. I mean, really, most of us go through situations and circumstances that can be difficult to process sometimes. And it's just important to always have resources. So everything I write, even, these original books, everything I write I try to include mental health resources because, well, a large portion of what I talk about is mental health related. So, um, I also um, wrote in this book, this compilation. I have a chapter in it, and that is also available on my website. The title is Notes from Motherland, and it is a compilation with 13, I think it's 13 different women. But you can also get that on the website, Notes from Motherland, and mine is chapter 7. This one was published by Red Thread Publishing, and I encourage you to look into their other books too. They have other books, all kinds of things, fiction, nonfiction, um, all kind of stuff. So Red Thread Publishing is that one, and then yeah, I think that's about it for today. So a little bit of the backstory of Dirt on My Cloth and a little bit of chapter 1. Um, if you buy the book in the next 6 months to a year, it may look slightly different on the wording because, there's some things I might tweak wording wise. It's not going to change the message, not going to change the story will still be the same. But if you want to get the original copies, the unedited, or not, and should I say the unrevised, absolute original, they are on my website now, and they will be on my website indefinitely. I only have a certain number of these though. So if you want this original, specific, unrevised copy, um, you can order that on my website while there won't be any more published of that version. So while they're available, go ahead and get them. All right. That is my episode for today. And thank you for listening or watching. And I hope that you stick around because I am going to dive into the book more. I'm going to read a little bit of each chapter in different videos. So stick around for that. And if you subscribe, then you get notifications when those come out. So see ya. Check us out on YouTube at Rhea Higgs, ReaHagues. You can also keep up with us on Instagram at Just the Who Podcast.